Hello and welcome to Force 13 Live as we are tracking a very dangerous situation developing right now in India. The extremely severe cyclonic storm Fani continues to barrel its way towards India and get rather dangerously close to the major population center of Kolkata. I am Devin Williams here to provide live coverage for the next hour or hour and a half or so on this very dangerous situation that's currently unfolding. And I guess the best way to go to start right now is to talk about the intensity of the storm, which, as of right now, it is currently a 160 mile per hour Category 5 storm, although as you can see in the last few frames, it is starting to deteriorate. So hopefully, the storm will dip beneath the Category 5 intensity and continue to deteriorate as the storm comes ashore. Regardless, the storm is expected to be a stage 7 on the cyclone destruction potential scale, with rains in excess up to or maybe in excess of 400 millimeters in areas, and we'll get to that as soon as possible. But first, right now, I want to read off all of the warnings in the areas. So we've got heavy rainfall warnings pretty much in any place where the cyclone is heading. North Andhra Pradesh, light to moderate rainfall at most places, with isolated heavy to very heavy rainfall over Visakhapatnam and the Vijayanagaram district, and isolated heavy to extremely heavy rainfalls, which is in excess of 20 centimeters, over the Srikakulam district on the 2nd of May, with heavy to very heavy rainfall over the same district on the 3rd. In Odisha, light to moderate rainfall at most places, with heavy to very heavy rainfall at a few places, and extreme heavy rainfalls over Ganjam and the Gajapati districts. At isolated places, very likely over the south coast and adjoining interior Odisha on the 2nd. And it is likely to increase with moderate rainfall at most places and heavy to very heavy rainfall at a few places, and the extreme heavy rainfall at isolated places over coastal Odisha and adjoining districts of interior Odisha on the 3rd. In West Bengal, light to moderate rainfall at most places, with heavy to very heavy rainfall at a few places and extreme heavy rainfalls at isolated places, very likely over coastal and adjoining districts of West Bengal on the 3rd, and heavy to very heavy rainfalls at isolated places over the Gangetic West Bengal on the 4th of May. Light to moderate rainfall at most places, with heavy falls at isolated places over sub-Himalayan West Bengal and Sikkim on the 4th of May. In other places, light to moderate rainfall is expected over the next few days. As far as the wind warning, this is more than likely going to be the most significant threat, but we'll get there in a moment. Gale wind speeds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour and gusting up to 230 kilometers per hour, likely more than that. We could definitely see winds gusting over 250 kilometers an hour with this storm. Is very likely to prevail over west central Bay of Bengal around the system center during the next 24 hours and decrease thereafter. Okay, just wanted to make sure I didn't get kicked off the stream there. Squally winds reaching 40 to 50 kilometers per hour and gusting to 60 kilometers per hour is very likely to prevail along and off North Andhra Pradesh and Odisha coasts and become gale wind speeds reaching 60 to 70 kilometers per hour and gusting to 85 kilometers per hour tonight. It is very likely to become 170 to 180 kilometers per hour in the Srikakulam district and 90 to 100 kilometers per hour, up to 115 kilometers per hour along and off the remaining districts of coastal Odisha and North Andhra Pradesh districts by the 3rd of May forenoon and subsequent 12 hours. This will decrease thereafter, obviously, as the storm continues to move inland. As far as the sea conditions, obviously, the seas are going to be very rough. Don't go out in the sea during the storm. It's an extremely severe cyclonic storm, so don't do that. Storm surge warning, and this is the very big thing. Storm surge of about 1.5 meters height above astronomical tide is very likely to inundate low-lying areas of Ganjam, Kurda, Puri, Jagatsinghpur districts of Odisha at the time of landfall. So we're talking storm surge in the range of about 1 to 2 meters, which is definitely damaging to say the least. And damage is expected, obviously. Anything that is going to be in the storm surge, it's going to be flooding, very bad flooding with storm surge getting up to 2 meters. I mean, that's more than 6 feet. So, and it'll probably be higher than that considering that the storm is stronger than the advisory suggests. So, we could very easily be seeing a 10-foot surge coming out of this into very low-lying areas of India. And that's something I do want to show here, is that if we take a look at a topographic map of India, and you can see here, along with the very large population center of Kolkata, which I am personally very concerned about here, you can see this entire area is pretty much in a river delta. This is a very low-lying area of India. Very easy for the flooding storm surge to be able to come in and inundate the area, and especially taking a look at Bangladesh, although it does look like Bangladesh is probably going to be spared at least a little bit from this storm, as this is expected to move inland well to the west of Bangladesh here. As you can see, here's Kolkata, which the storm will be passing uh, frighteningly close to say the least, and we'll still be bringing surge into here. But same thing with Bangladesh. It could very easily bring some storm surge into western Bangladesh. I don't know how significant the surge is going to be in those areas, though. We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, this is an awful, awful situation for millions of people. As far as from what I saw, at least 2 million people have evacuated out of the way of this storm. To take a look at what the rainfall could look like, at least a graphical forecast, and obviously this is not a final product, this is just one model run. So don't take this at face value, but let me interpret it for you. Basically, anything in the yellows over here will be receiving roughly 200 millimeters of rain, and anything in this bright yellow here could be receiving 300 to maybe 400 millimeters of rain. So if you needed a graphical forecast, there you go. This is pretty much what they're expecting. This covers pretty much all of the heavy rain warnings in the area as this storm continues to move closer to land. See if we have new satellite here from RAM. Indeed we do. And one thing, like I already said, the storm is deteriorating. It had these very tall, you could see the medium gray cloud tops. I'll just stop it right at the beginning here. You can see the medium gray cloud tops extended all the way around the eye, which is very impressive for a storm to be able to do. And plus, it also had the warmest temperature that the eye could possibly be on this satellite image, which is a warm medium gray. So this is an extremely impressive image here from Cyclone Fani. As the storm continues to move northward, though, you can see that the eye kind of starts losing its definition, and these grays are really starting to go away. And now we're at the current image where the gray is pretty much relegated to the western semicircle. The eye has cooled off significantly, so it's entirely possible that the storm has now lost its Category 5 status, at least taking a look at this image. I don't think that the storm is a Category 5 anymore, but regardless of if it's a 4, if it's a 5, it really doesn't matter. It is an extremely dangerous situation for the coast of India ahead here. Obviously, landslides within the area, especially in the western area here, because you take a look, I'll bring up the topographic map again because you can see that there are actually some mountains that are in this region here. So, not too far inland, the land actually goes up quite a significant amount, several kilometers up, actually. So, you got to consider here that it's entirely possible that landslides could happen here where the coast is very steep along these mountains. And yeah, that's pretty much right where the largest rainfall is expected to be, right in that region there. So, landslides in that region will obviously be a very significant concern, along with the storm surge and the extreme winds that are going to be coming from this storm. Uh, the extreme winds obviously being the largest threat from this thing, with winds in excess of 150 miles per hour expected from this thing. Yeah, that's one of the crazy things here is that this storm, this we've had a lot of dangerous storms already. Obviously, we had Cyclone Idai in the southern hemisphere, which caused unbelievable devastation to Mozambique and Zimbabwe. And then Mozambique ended up getting hit again by Kenneth. And now here we have Cyclone Fani, which seems to be heading towards a very large population center in India. So overall, this is really not a good situation at all. We've already had a lot of death and devastation this year, and obviously, we don't want to see any more of this. But this cyclone continues to move closer and closer here, and again, it is losing a little bit of its shape, which I guess which I'm sure will calm a few people, but still the surge is going to be there. Still, the heavy rains are still going to be there. And I hate to really say the only thing, but the good thing is that the rains won't be catastrophically huge in this storm, to say the least. With the storms that we've had in the southern hemisphere, we've been talking rains of 30 inches, 40 inches, maybe even up to 50 inches in some areas. And this storm looks like it's probably not even going to reach 15 inches. So that's a good thing. Uh, an extreme, a catastrophic biblical rainfall is not going to fall from this storm, as it's not expected to stall. It's expected to move. It's expected to keep its motion up pretty quickly here and move in and out of the area pretty quickly. And it's a pretty small storm, to say the least. It's not a particularly large tropical cyclone. With the when you talk about the CDPS, obviously it's a stage 7, which is actually quite low for a category 5. Where, well, I have the projection here as a category 4, but that's still quite a low rating, considering how strong the winds are. And the main reason is because the rainfall is not expected to be huge, and the reason why, along with quite a rapid forward speed out of this storm. If I remember correctly, this thing's moving at like 15, 16 knots, or 10 knots. It could be moving at 10 knots, but it's expected to pick up its forward speed to 15 or 16 knots. And You add that with the storm not being very big. I mean, you got a gale radius here of 160 miles to the south and east, but even then, you talk about the northeast, southwest, and northwest quadrants. It's not very big at all. The largest quadrants there being 140 nautical miles, and the hurricane winds are very compact to the center, only extending out 35 miles from the center. So the storm is not very big at all. So if there is one thing to take from this storm is that it is not a very large one to say the least. Um so the storm's just sorry about that. But the storm's just going to continue to move inland. Taking a look at a few model runs here just to show you exactly what is expected of the storm as it continues to move inland. You can see it'll move inland, kind of cut to the north and east here, pretty much right across Kolkata. Hopefully, the storm has significantly weakened due to inland effects by then. It'll move across Bangladesh and move into India, where it's expected to stall over here in the eastern Himalayan region. However, I don't think that the storm is expected to be much by the time it gets there. As you can see, yeah, here's the Himalayan range. It's going to be stalling right and about there. The storm's not going to be much by the time it gets over there. So, rainfall is not expected to be huge in that area. And obviously, even though this is a little outdated, this will show you at least a couple of runs with the strength. And you could see landfall occurs and it's a plummet. There's no brown ocean going to be happening here. It's going to be a plummet. It's going to die down very quickly, and mainly thanks to this little the the Chat Chatanagapur the Chatanagpur plateau here. The plateau here. The storm is going to be moving across that, and that will suck quite a bit amount of intensity out of the storm. So fingers crossed on that we don't get extremely heavy rainfalls over in the Himalayan region, even though the storm is pretty much expected to stall over there. As I continue to look for new information coming in. As far as the actions suggested here, so let's go over this because this is pretty much important. Yeah, 10 out of 10 pronunciation. I'm trying my best here. Please bear with me. I'm obviously not native to the area. I'm from middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. I've never once tried to pronounce a Hindi word, so please bear with me if my pronunciations are not exactly perfect. I'm trying my best. So, as far as the actions suggested in Cyclone Fani's path, total suspension of fishing operations. That should be pretty straightforward. Don't go out in the ocean in the cyclone. Extensive evacuation from coastal areas. We've gotten that. Like I said, 2 million have evacuated in preparation for this storm. Diversion or suspension of rail and road traffic. Obviously, do not travel when you're out in the middle. When this storm hits, you don't want to be traveling. You don't want to be out in the middle of this. This is really not a storm you want to be traveling out in. I know people get caught up in traffic during these storms, and then the storm ends up coming on, and then all of a sudden you're stuck in a car in a category 3, 4, 5 storm. You don't want that. So obviously, no going out in the roads If you've already, whatever shelter you found is the shelter you're going to have to stick with. Someone asked, is it still strengthening? No. It has peaked. It's weakening. You can see it from the satellite loop that I currently have on the screen. It is it is starting to weaken. However, it's really not the big point to be taking away from this, as even though yes, it's weakening, uh, it's not going to weaken to a significant amount that the landfall effects are going to be diminished in any significant way. So let's see here. Next thing that they expect, people in affected areas to remain indoors. That's pretty much what I just said. And movement in motorboats and small ships not advisable. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Don't go out in the ocean or bays or anything like that in the middle of the storm. So we have here, as far as damage expected, extensive damage to all types of kucha houses, some damage to old, badly managed puka structures, potential threat from flying objects, obviously. There's going to be a significant threat from flying objects considering how strong the storm is. Extensive uprooting of communications and power poles. That goes without saying with how strong it is. Disruption of railroad links at several places. Obviously, if there's a flooded roadway, there's a good chance that the roadway is going to be completely washed out. Don't drive through any flooded roadways. Um, people, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought here. Major damage to Kucha and Puka roads, obviously, flooding of escape routes, minor disruption of railways, overhead power lines, and signaling of systems. Widespread damage is expected to occur to standing crops, plantations, orchards, falling of green coconuts, and tearing of palm fronds, blowing down of bushy trees like mango. Small boats, country crafts may get detached from moorings. Uh, Visibility severely affected. Out of all of the things that they list here, visibility severely affected. Yeah, I guess. Hoarding, flex, and banners hanging loose are likely to fly off and damage surroundings. Go back to potential threat from flying objects. And obviously, those should be removed and brought out of harm's way. Damage expected and action suggested for Kendra Para, Badrak, Jashpur, Balsador districts of Odisha, and East and West Medinapur, South and North 24 Parganas, Howrah, Hooghly, Kolkata districts of Western Bengal, and Srikakulam, Visakhapatnam, and Vijayanagaram district of Andhra Pradesh. As far as actions suggested, pretty much the exact same things I just went over. Total suspension of fishing operations, mobilize evacuation from coastal areas, suspension of rail and road traffic. People in affected areas remain indoors. Movement in motorboats and small ships unsafe. As far as what did Fani peak at, it looks like it peaked at 160 miles per hour. But we'll have to wait for all the official data to come in to see what it actually peaked at. As far as the post landfall outlook, I guess this is pretty important. After the landfall, the system is very likely to continue to move northeastward, weakening gradually and emerging into the Gangetic West Bengal as a severe cyclonic storm and moved to Bangladesh, therefore, after weakening. Interior districts of West Bengal are very likely to experience gale wind speeds of 90 to 100 kilometers per hour, gusting to 115 in the early morning of the 4th of May. It is very likely to decrease gradually, becoming 60 to 70 kilometers per hour by the evening of the 4th of May. Interior districts adjoining to the south coastal Odisha regions are very likely to experience cyclone wind speeds of 120 to 130 kilometers per hour for 6 hours after landfall, and 90 to 100 kilometers per hour over districts adjoining north coastal Odisha from the evening on the 3rd till the early morning of the 4th of May, and the storm will obviously weaken thereafter. As far as the damage expected in adjoining interior districts of Odisha further inland, minor damage to power and communication lines, major damage to Kutsha, and some damage to Puka roads, flooding of escape routes, breaking of tree branches, uprooting of large avenue trees, moderate damage to banana and papaya trees, and large dead limbs will be blown down from trees. So that is pretty much what they're expecting in terms of damage. And again, the storm is pretty much expected to move east northeast northeast after it ends up making landfall here as it continues to move towards the north. The, let me get a new satellite image here because I'm sure one has come in by now. Indeed, we have a new one. And it continues to show degradation of the storm as it moves closer to its landfall. And if anything, it's kind of showing some concentric eye wall features there as I failed miserably at pausing it. You can kind of see a concentric eye wall feature here in the infrared. Of course, we'd have to see it on the microwave image to confirm that, but I think the microwave image is hours out of date. But you can definitely see kind of like a concentric eye wall structure here developing, at least here on the western side. And of course, the eastern side is really starting to degrade. And again, this thing doesn't really look like a category 5 anymore, but it at least looks like it's maintained its intensity over the past hour or so. Hopefully, it will continue to weaken as it moves closer and closer to India here. You are watching Force 13 live. We are doing an update here on Cyclone Fani. We expect to be live for roughly another half an hour here as updates continue to pour in from the storm. The very severe cyclonic storm is very likely to hit Bangladesh on Friday evening as it is heading towards the country. Well, it's heading towards India right now, but it is expected to cross into Bangladesh eventually. As far as, and again, I'll pull up at least one cone here. This is the unofficial JTWC cone, but nonetheless, it is a cone. And you can see that the storm is expected to cross over northern Bangladesh here. And the IMD cone isn't any different from this, really. I'm taking a look at it right now, and it's pretty much the exact same thing. If anything, the IMD cone is actually further to the north of this. So the GTWC has this curving off to the east more, and the IMD has it pretty much staying to the north here and potentially entering China. But it is expected to stall somewhere in that region as a very, very weak storm. Probably not be producing any rainfall at that rate. Um, what else is there really to trying to figure out what else there is to talk about here? Because I think we've pretty much covered all of the bases here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open it up to viewer questions at this point in time. If you have any questions for us, please send the question to us. Type in Force 13 all in text, so I'm very easily able to see it, and I'll get your question answered as soon as possible. As far as the storm's current intensity, it did peak as a Category 5 earlier today. You could see pretty much right at the beginning of when the satellite loop starts, that's when it pretty much peaked. And the storm has degraded over the last 4 hours or so and has steadily weakened beneath Category 5 intensity. Now it's definitely a Category 4. But it does look like that only gradual weakening will happen as the storm continues to move closer to land. There's really no reason for the storm to weaken all that much other than the storm's structural deficiencies itself. Obviously, the storm over the past few days has really struggled with its structure and just finally got itself together this morning in a very scary state. All these storms that have just been rapidly intensifying right before landfall. Idai was one of them. Kenneth was another, and yeah, we got another one here that rapidly intensified right before landfall. Luckily, all these storms that have done it have also weakened before landfall, and it looks like this will continue to be the case here with Cyclone Fani as it continues to move inland. It is rated a stage 7 on the cyclone destruction potential scale, which really rates it very high. Not necessarily high for Category 4 standards, but it is very high on the scale nonetheless. It is still, if we were to put this storm in the Atlantic basin, we'd be talking about this storm would be making landfall with a destructive potential greater than, I think that would end up being, well, let me figure this out. Yeah, end up being a destructive potential greater than 85% of any of the storms that have made landfall in the Atlantic. So this is obviously a very severe situation uh, that is going to be going on for India. Rainfall estimates are to likely get as high as 400 millimeters of rain in the area uh, near landfall. I'll bring up a rainfall graphic again. And again, I must state that this is not a final product. But, anyways, this is not to be taken at face value. So I'll tell you exactly what you need to look at from here. And that's basically any of this is uncertain up here. We don't know how much rain is actually going to fall up here. So that's really not a certain forecast at all. However, here is pretty certain. Anywhere you see a yellow, that's where they're expecting 200 millimeters of rain. And then you have the bright yellow here. That's where the most extreme rainfall is expected to be. And then this little orange here, that's where around the 400 millimeter is rainfall is expected to be. That's where the peak rainfall is expected, right in that area. And again, that coincides right here with the Chotanagpur Plateau that is right here over land that the storm will be moving right over and hopefully take a very good bite out of this storm before it ends up moving into the very low-lying regions of Bangladesh and causing even more issues over there than there really needs to be. And again, as I said before, we have storm surge expected to be 1.5 meters, potentially up to 2 meters in the landfall area. And the storm, and obviously that's really significant. We're talking potentially up to 6 feet of storm surge, and that'll inundate a lot of places along this area because even though it does rise up pretty quickly here, you could see right here along at least this notch of coast here is a very low lying area. Kolkata, a very low lying area. Bangladesh, a very low lying country entirely. So, and you could see here in that notch right there, there's your rain. So, the rainfall forecast is definitely there to say the least. So, flooding remains to be a significant concern from the storm. 200 millimeters of rain plus expected from this place in pretty much anywhere that there's a yellow in here, anyways. So, obviously, that is an extreme rainfall event. Mudslides could occur in the more mountainous regions. And as far as the JTWC expecting to upgrade the storm to a Category 5, it wouldn't surprise me if they did. I mean, the storm definitely warranted its look earlier, and usually the JTWC is late to the party. So we'll see. Obviously, this storm was a Category 5 earlier. I mean, pretty unquestionably was a Category 5 earlier. There's not much debating that. I mean, you could see just there in the early frames just how good the structure looked, and even then, the structure looked even better than that. So, undoubtedly a Category 5 earlier today, but this is not the case right now as the storm continues to degrade. Uh, just to reiterate some of the warnings here, we have heavy rainfall warnings. Extremely heavy rainfalls, greater than 20 centimeters, is expected over the Srikakulam district, is expected over the Ganjam and Gajapati districts. Extremely heavy rainfalls at isolated places over coastal Odisha and adjoining districts. Extreme heavy rainfalls at isolated places, very likely to occur over coastal and adjoining districts of West Bengal. Wind warning, we have wind speeds reaching 200 to 210 kilometers per hour, gusting to 230 kilometers per hour, or potentially even more, is very likely to prevail over west central Bay of Bengal around the system center for the next 24 hours and decrease as it moves inland. Wind speeds are expected to come 170 to 180 kilometers per hour and gusting to 200 kilometers per hour along and off South Odisha and adjoining North Andhra Pradesh, the Srikakulam district's coast. So that's where the most extreme wind is expected to be. Storm surge warning. Storm surge of about 1.5 meters height above astronomical tide is very likely to inundate low-lying areas of Ganjam, Kurda, Puri, Jagat Singhpur districts of Odisha at the time of landfall. So those are all the most significant. Those are all the most significant warnings currently in effect. Basically, in the landfall area, extensive damages to all types of houses and roads are expected. Flying debris is expected to also be a significant threat. Extensive uprooting of communications and power poles will leave you out of power for a very long time. Disruption of rail and road links at several places. Extensive damage to standing crops, plantations, and orchards. blowing down of palm and coconut trees, as in these winds will be strong enough to just absolutely flatten them. Uprooting of large bushy trees, and it doesn't take a very strong wind to uproot trees like that. They could just blow right down. It doesn't take Category 5 winds to do that. So if a large tree ends up getting uprooted, uh, and that ends up being scattered all over the place, it would not surprise me. And another thing is that large boats and ships may get torn from their moorings, and that the seas are going to be so rough and the winds are going to be so strong that it can actually pull the boats right off the dock. So that's the kind of winds that we're expecting out of this storm. Again, winds in excess of 150 miles per hour could be possible with this storm. Obviously, we're hoping that the storm continues to weaken as it moves inland, so that doesn't end up happening. But however, there is a possibility that that very much could end up occurring here if it ends up maintaining its intensity as the storm moves northward. And once again, here, taking a look at the cone of uncertainty for the storm. And this is not the official cone, this is just the JTWC cone. The official cone lies to the west of this. And you can see the storm moving ashore here, coming perilously close to the large population center of Kolkata, moving over northern Bangladesh, and then eventually moving over northeastern India and stalling. And that stalling here could absolutely happen over the Himalayan region, and obviously that's right there. Himalayan range is right there. So once the storm gets over there, it's very likely that the storm is well, it's going to lose a lot of intensity by the time it gets there, and it's probably going to be nothing left by the time it gets over there. So it wouldn't surprise me if the storm's just nothing. Obviously, the rainfall, once again, you can see here, anywhere in the yellow, 200 millimeters of rain expected. We have this orange here, where rainfall is expected to be at or around 400 millimeters. And that, again, coincides with this uplift here at the very southeastern corner of the Chotanagpur Plateau here in southeastern India. Otherwise, it's all very low-lying flat land ahead of the system, where very heavy rains will probably cause flooding rather quickly. So that needs to really be kept in mind here. You can see all of these blues, dark blues. Obviously, dark blues basically means at or below sea level. You can see Kolkata is there. Almost all of Bangladesh is in a very dark blue. And you can see this region right here, which is right around where the storm's going to make landfall. I mean, it's going to come ashore around here. It's going to funnel water in this area. This is where I would imagine the worst of the surge is going to be, is right on this peninsula here. At least that's where it's looking like, that the largest and probably the worst storm surge is going to occur. Storm surges in Kolkata and Bangladesh will also happen, though the storm will be weakened, so it'll probably be much less than the storm surge that happens right here on this little peninsula. See if we have a new image loaded yet. And indeed we do, and you can really see now that the storm is starting to fall apart here on the eastern side. The western side is just looking in shambles, and the eastern side, you can see the blacks are starting to show through the whites, which means that the cloud tops continue to warm up. They're not getting as tall, and that means that the storm's really starting to wind down now. It could be as weak as 150 miles per hour at this point, without the whites being all the way around the eye in a symmetric form. You could see that very easily being the case just right here. That's pretty circular, you know? And then you take a look at the final image here, and it is not looking good at all. So you can see cut in, cut in, cut in, and then all of these blacks here. It's not a very good look for this storm at all. So we continue to get good news here as Cyclone Fani continues to weaken, albeit slowly, as it moves towards India. As it's likely down to 150 miles per hour at this point. An Iowa replacement cycle is likely. That's probably what it's going through right now, and it's not going to have any time to complete it. If we take a look at a microwave image, and I did not want to pull up a loop of that. As you could see, the definition is extremely poor, so can't really say much about it, honestly. Plus, I think it's severely out of date. And yeah, it is. It's severely out of date. So we're talking like 3 hours out of date. So that microwave image tells us precisely nothing about this storm. One thing I do want to do though is let's bring up a loop of the last 24 hours because this will give us an idea of what the storm has done at least over the past 24 hours because this will show you exactly how the storm struggled with its structure at first. You can see here it's small and it's been struggling, and then it started getting its act together overnight. And then, boom, big cyclone comes out. So you can really see how quickly this storm intensified and got to the state where it is now. And look at that. You can see it here. It's probably a category 1 at the beginning of this. And there it is as a Cat 5. So that's pretty much how the storm has gone at this point. And now it's continuing to move towards India to bring very life threatening winds and storm surge to the area. Rainfall is also expected to be pretty heavy, in excess of 40 centimeters in some areas. Hopefully, it doesn't exceed that, but the expected maximum rainfall right now is around 40. Local radar doesn't show a second wind maximum, but it does show a fractured eye. Oh, local radar is not a resource that I was able to find in time, but that is good to know. Um, Obviously, that means that the storm is losing its internal structure because these storms they need that complete eye in order to maintain their intensity. It's pretty much the way of that eye is basically it's a very integral part of the engine. You absolutely need it. It's pretty much almost the intake valve to the engine. You if you can't let any air into the engine, it all falls apart. So, and when you have the eye start to break down like that on the radar, it's like having a leak in the intake. And the engine's not going to work if that happens. So it starts sputtering. And that's pretty much what this thing is doing. So you can see here with the eye having the break in it, you can see that these cloud tops just start going away rapidly. You can see the slow build up, slow build up, slow build up, and then once that ice starts falling apart, the cloud tops just go away rapidly. Even though it's only happened in like the last 4 hours or so, it's a lot of energy to dissipate. There is a lot of energy with these storms that need to dissipate. So, yes. And then there you go. That's a key point right there. That the fractured eye, it's going to be on that eastern side, right where the warmer cloud tops are going to be. It's exactly what you would expect. Obviously, the colder cloud tops would be facing the land side of the storm, because that's where there's going to be some uplift due to the land, and you're going to expect taller cloud tops on that side of the storm. So that really all makes sense. Um, Anyways, here we're only going to go live. We're only going to be live here for the next 3 or 4 minutes or so. Uh, Fani's maximum winds, I believe they peaked at 160 miles per hour. It, I don't know if there's too much more to say that it got much stronger than that, because the eye never really got that warm. As far as webcams in India, I'm not 100% sure. And again, the live coverage here is going to end here at the bottom of the hour in a few minutes. So if there's any last minute questions, I'll be happy to take them before going off the air. As far as a quick roundup, the storm is weakening. It was a Cat 5 earlier. It definitely does not have the structure of a Category 5 now. It likely has maximum sustained winds of somewhere in the region of 150 miles per hour at this point. The storm will continue to weaken steadily as the storm continues to move towards the land. As far as the land impacts that are expected, and this is right out of the IMD advisory, extensive damages to all types of houses, and some damage to old and badly managed roads. Obviously, a threat from flying debris. Extensive uprooting of communication and power poles will leave you out of power for a long time. Disruption of rail and road links at several places. Extensive damage to crops, plantations, and orchards. Blowing down of palm and coconut trees. Uprooting of large bushy trees. And large boats might be torn right out of their docks. As far as the action that is suggested, we are the IMD suggests total suspension of fishing operations. Obviously, don't go out in the ocean during this storm. Extensive evacuations of coastal areas. Diversion or suspension of rail and road traffic. I would say suspension of rail and road traffic. Do not be out in this storm at all. People in affected areas should remain indoors, and the movement of in motorboats and small ships, obviously any kind of water activity not suggested at all. If you would like to follow Force 13 more, we have a Facebook page and a Twitter page. Just look at that, Force 13 all in text. We have a Discord server where you can join in tropical weather discussion. You can click on the link down here. We have a Discord link. You can go ahead and join that. If you want to support us, we have a Patreon page, and we also have a merchandise page where you can buy official Force 13 merchandise. So go ahead and check that out. However, this live stream is going to come to an end at this point. Please stay tuned to Force 13 for further tropical weather information as Cyclone Fani continues to move perilously close to the Indian coastline. Have a good night.